Hey there, folks. I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. I think I might be getting worse at some of these predictions. Not only did Taylor Swift not get a full album bomb for her re-release of Fearless like I thought she would, I seemingly missed the surprise big story surrounding yet another new #1 that should have been on my radar. Kinda came out of nowhere for me, and it shouldn't have, especially given all the hype I've been talking about and encouraging for the artist this past couple of years. So let's talk about it. Our new top 10, new #1, RAPSTAR by Polo G. Now, I'll talk more about the song later, and you know what, maybe my ear wasn't to the ground enough to hear this coming, but let's make it clear. It's riding off of ridiculously strong streaming and YouTube and pretty much nothing else. In other words, it's another weak #1, and given how streaming fluctuates, I can't really predict this as anything close to long-term success. Now, what gets interesting is Montero, Call Me By Your Name by Lil Nas X, held on to #2, riding off the sales pickup and its own solid streaming. Although with radio still being very slow to get on board, I've got a lot of big questions still about sustainability here. And that reflects on Leave the Door Open by Silk Sonic slipping down a little bit to #3 on sales and streaming slipping despite seizing the top spot on the radio. Again, it still has enough forward momentum in all channels to be a larger hit. I'd put money on this going back to #1, given that it does at least have some consistency in all channels. Probably would say the same for Peaches by Justin Bieber featuring Daniel Caesar and Giveon at #4. The sales and streaming, they might have dropped back a little bit, but its strength and radio really is making up for it. Just a margins game at this point. Then stepping back into a lower tier of success, we've got Save Your Tears by The Weeknd, actually up a little bit to #5. Yeah, the radio might be on a run, but it's really all it has. And yet that's just barely enough to stay over Levitating by Dua Lipa featuring DaBaby at #6, which is going on a small radio run of its own, but just cannot keep up. Then we got another new arrival in our top 10. One I actually did hear about ahead of time, Kiss Me More by Doja Cat featuring SZA at #7. And if there's a song I would put some money on continuing up, it's probably this one, because the radio has moved very quickly with this, and while the sales aren't really there, the streaming is, so it can have some real traction. Then we got Up by Cardi B at #8, and if her team is not sounding the alarm about how this is now skidding in streaming and the radio, that album rollout could be in trouble if it doesn't pick up. And while I wouldn't really say the same thing with Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo down to #9, even if she's got an album coming too, this only really has the radio, and it is on the downswing. Finally, holding firm like a lingering fart, we've got Astronaut in the Ocean by Masked Wolf at #10, which took some hits on sales and streaming, but is still solid. The only reason this did not pick up slots is because the radio is slowed down just a little bit, but again, I think this is going to get higher, only just a matter of time. But now we got to get to our losers and dropouts, and I'm not really sure how I feel about them. Because we had a few big ones in the latter category, like Body by Megan Thee Stallion, and Whoopty by CJ, that got their year-end list spots for 2021. But it looks like Busted by Erica Banks, and more importantly, Put Your Records On by Rip Momney, they fell short. And in the latter case, that's a win. Well, hell, truth be told, our losers are kind of all over the place. Some in new arrivals that mostly didn't hold, like from Demi Lovato with Dancing with the Devil and Met Him Last Night with Ariana Grande, falling to 98 and 93 respectively, along with Run It Up by Lil TJ featuring Offset and Moneybagg Yo at 79, and For Da Gang by 42 Doug and Roddy Ricch at 84. Then there are the gains that slid back a little bit. Quicksand by Murray just unfortunately is not getting traction, now back at 85, and Starting Over by Chris Stapleton looks to be rotating back a bit at 42. With Al, country seeing a fair amount of losses, with What's Your Country Song by Thomas Rhett at 54, Mama's House by Dustin Lynch at 69, and Wasted on You by Morgan Wallen at 97. Again, Nashville's rotating through for the season. Then you got your album bomb losers, like from Rod Wave with Street Runner at 53, and from Justin Bieber with Anyone at 70, and the rest are kind of scattered. My Head and My Heart by Ava Max sliding down to 73, Masterpiece by DaBaby at 82 with just no traction whatsoever, and Real As It Gets by Lil Baby featuring ESTG continuing to fade back to 100. But where this week actually gets kind of tough It's in our gains and in our returns. Okay, maybe not our gains, because they were pretty much all in country sweeping in for the new season, as I said, which on the plus side has Made For You by Jake Owen getting a lot of radio support up to 43. That sounds good, I'm happy. Unfortunately, it also has Down to 1 by Luke Bryan at 61, and The Good Ones by Gabby Barrett up to 19. She's got a shocking amount of sales traction, and that's not good in the slightest. And you know, it's not tough because of Taylor Swift, who saw gains from Mr. Perfectly Fine rise up to 30, and in our returns have both Love Story and You All Over Me with Maren Morris back at 52 and 72 respectively. No, all of this is because of 3 high charting returns from the late DMX, who passed away this year on April 9th. I'll be honest, I wasn't really prepared to say much here because DMX was a bit before my time, and I got into New York rap later than any other subgenre in hip-hop, but in truth it's because my relationship to DMX and his music has been messy, to say the least. I can say his first 2 albums, they're downright excellent for what they were at that time. A brand of desperate, explosive late 90s rap that became extremely influential in that era, half because DMX was a man who was never be able to find personal peace, and he was exploited by his label in great effect to create art from that pain in the same way Old Dirty Bastard was. But I can also say that after those 2 albums, the quality did drop off pretty sharply, and even the good albums can feel very dated to a specific window in hip-hop in the late 90s, and there's no way to ignore the ugly context and how religion, machismo, and a lot of homophobia intermingled to highlight for as much as DMX accepted his own downward spiral, there were some for which he was punching down and he was going to take down with them. I'm not saying all this not to damn or praise him, because while people were calling all this out during the time, his attitudes were pretty widespread and commonly held by a lot of folks throughout that era. People tend to forget just how much has changed in the past 20 plus years. But it does a disservice to the man to not see the whole complicated picture. Hate him and his music, or love him. And what that translates to in the Hot 100, Rough Riders Anthem came back to 16, Party Up in Here went up to 40, and Next Go and Give It To You, it's at 46. I'm just happy that Where the Hood At didn't come back. If you know, you know. But now on to our new arrivals, and spoilers, there's a lot of Taylor Swift ahead. Starting off with number 94, The Way I Loved You, Taylor's version by Taylor Swift. I'll be honest, I'm surprised at the deep cuts. This is one that charted, but it's a good surprise because along with White Horse, I would say this is one of the best songs on Fearless. I like it because she finds the fairy tale guy who should blow her mind and be the happy ever after, and yet she feels nothing because sometimes relationships just fizzle out. It just doesn't work. The chemistry might not be there. And frankly, this is the sort of song that only works better with age, and Taylor Swift nails it as a regard. The strings arrangement is more robust, the pop country tones are better balanced in the mix, even the little chime pieces, and Taylor Swift can sell this a lot more effectively in her early 30s than in her late teens. In other words, this is the sort of re-recording that's the best possible improvement. A great song that's only made better. And if you never heard this, because, again, it's a deep cut, this one's worth looking out. Unlike number 88, 15, Taylor's version by Taylor Swift. Before you know who you're gonna be. Okay, let's not mince words. I've always thought 15 was one of the worst songs on Fearless because it was going for pretensions of wisdom that couldn't hold up because Taylor Swift was still in her teens herself and she couldn't sell it, and the points of emotional resonance, they were more placed on her friend Abigail than her in the song. And yet this was a track that had me a bit curious with the re-recording. It's easier when you're in your 30s looking back at your teenage years and conveying some wisdom. And you know what, to Taylor Swift's credit, the song is considerably more convincing, with a more refined arrangement here, and her being, again, a better singer. Or hell, you know what, just being older helps sell the song more. I still don't really like it that much. It feels plaintive and a little clunky in the lyricism, but Wisdom does make this resonate a little more, and I can say it's not exactly bad to me anymore. I'll give her that. Number 87, Shy Away by 21 Pilots. Like a song he wrote, it's never heard. I I gotta be honest, I've got no idea where 21 Pilots are going with this next album. It's apparently called Scaled and Icy. The album art has a dragon on it. Kind of reminds me of a specific stripe of fantasy-inspired classic rock from the 60s and 70s. This is the lead-off single, and I'm not gonna lie, there is something very distinctly retro about this song, in that in the main guitar riff, the quicker groove, it kind of reminds me of a specific new wave post-punk sound that would have come out of the late 70s, or more likely the early 2000s post-punk revival, and specifically some earlier music from the Strokes. Now, again, not a bad thing, even if it is becoming surprisingly more influential. It leaves the song a sharper leanness that Tyler Joseph's production can actually give some swell, especially when the vocals get a little bit more visceral for the final hook. And the content's pretty good too, playing an older brother role to a figure who's looking to find their own authentic expression in their own art, and Tyler Joseph hits a pretty good balance between having the tough love and giving some genuine advice. Just winds up a really damn solid song. Not among their best, or I would call their most climactic, and I do kind of question why this was chosen as a lead-off single, but it is the sort of song I suspect will have some decent staying power if well promoted. Good stuff. I like this. Number 81, Big Gangsta by Kevin Gates.
Cocaine a slanger, 100 of them just ordered up, surrounded by the angels. Diamonds on when I'm talking low. She won't be my little baby, but I'm afraid to fall in love.
Okay, look, there is a part of me that wants to root for Kevin Gates. Initially, I was on board with this guy before a few serious wrong turns derailed that appeal for me a couple years ago. So not exactly a good sign that his newest charting hit is a song from 2019 that blew up thanks to TikTok. And okay, I get why this is popular off that hook alone, but man, from there on, it doesn't turn out all that well. For one, the clicking drum machine sounds painfully thin against that faint warble that passes off as a melody, but a larger issue might be Kevin Gates himself. Again, who's got a gift for some really great melodic hooks, but his verses, they just go off the rails. Some of this just feels kind of corny. The "I think my plug racist, all he send is white" line, talking about how his sister wanted a new body, so he got ass delivered. But then there are lines about how he got fat and grew some titties, or how the drum on his gun looks like tits now, and I'm starting to recognize exactly where his mind really is amidst all of the drug running. Coupled with how his flow gets kind of sloppier near the end of the verses, like with Moneybag Yo. See, this is where I could say we just root for Rod Wave, we move on, but the hook is legit good enough here that Kevin Gates could make this a hit if he ran with it properly. Shame it's just not better. That's all. Number 75, You Belong With Me, Taylor's version by Taylor Swift.
And you're all alone, so why can't you see? You belong with me. You belong with me.
Okay, I know she had to re-record this one of her biggest hits from this era, but if 15 benefited from age to recontextualize the song, You Belong With Me has only gotten considerably worse. Basically, the I'm Not Like Other Girls, the anthem, it's a song that might be relatable in its adolescent whinging and pettiness, but coming from Taylor Swift, it's just never been all that believable, especially as she stopped playing this sort of outcast in record time. So now being in her 30s, when you tack on the ugly fizzy guitar over that bridge that doesn't blend with anything, it makes a barely passable song over a decade ago just not any good for me. I get why this has an audience, I get why it worked at the time, but it's also heard way too many ironic frat boys sing this at karaoke, and even if Taylor Swift is a better singer now, worse arrangement, it's not good. Next. Number 71, Fearless, Taylor's version by Taylor Swift.
You take my hand and drag me head first, fearless.
I gotta be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that of the re-recordings, it's these next two that charted. Now for the title track, you might be able to explain it. First song on the album, apparently a fan favorite, but I was lukewarm on this years ago, and I still kinda am. The re-recording punches up the bass and the Hammond organ a little bit, and Taylor Swift does sound better, but it still can't get around some inconsistent drum mixing, and the fact that it's still a pretty clumsy song from a writing standpoint. I could see how it might have a little more resonance with Experience, not having any fear to fall in love. It's more relevant when you've been burned so many times before. But again, there's no rewrites or tuning to the lyrics, so it's still focusing on her first kiss. And I'm left thinking, teenagers aren't often that scared to fall in love. Often they want it. I mean, for me, it's just fine. Not all that good, not all that bad either. Couldn't care less. And on that note, number 65, Forever and Always, Taylor's version by Taylor Swift.
And you feel so low, you can't feel nothing at all. And you flash back to when he sad forever and always.
Okay, another fan favorite. This one also apparently about Joe Jonas, and this one I do get why it picked up the traction it does. It's a song that captures the panic of a relationship in mid-collapse, where you don't know what's happening or why it's happening, especially when that person might have said forever. And this just sounds like a more polished version of the original, where Taylor Swift sounds better, the mix is balanced better, but the song doesn't really hit for me, which I think holds true to the content, where it still feels kind of really adolescent and kind of passive-aggressive in approaching all of this. Doesn't capture the full spectrum of emotions like it should. I don't know, it doesn't feel like something Taylor Swift would have written today, and it doesn't quite hold up as well from her now. I mean, I put this success up to more nostalgia than anything else. I just wish the re-recording of White Horse had charted. That's all. Number 7, Kiss Me More by Doja Cat featuring SZA.
We ain't got nothing to lose. Oh.
So this is the Doja Cat's lead-off single for her next album, and I gotta be honest, with Street still on its run, I'm a little bit surprised she's now pushing another single. But then I remember that Hot Pink dropped in late 2019 and realized this timetable might make sense, where I just think Doja Cat has had more sustainability than even her label expected. But alright, she's teaming up with SZA, Dr. Luca's nowhere near the production. How'd it turn out? Honestly, I kind of like it. Yeah, it's pulling on an interpolation of Olivia Newton-John's Physical, and I'm left thinking that there are indeed other pop disco cuts from that era she could pull upon, and it's probably not the best idea to draw an immediate comparison to Dua Lipa's Physical, which is on a different tier and also has a similar interpolation, but the guitar-backed groove here is well balanced. There's a playfulness to the song that adds a lot of charm, and while I'm not really sure Doja Cat and SZA make the most out of any interplay they have, they got a lot of loose, horny energy on their verses in the song that's very playful and again, very likable. I'm not really sure it's got a factor to make it more than just very good, and that's been a recurring issue I've had with Doja Cat for a while now. I've been waiting for her to make an excellent song, not just a really good one, but outside of that, again, I dig it. It is a good song. And finally, number 1, RAPSTAR by Polo G.
So high up through the clouds, I was swimming. I'm probably gonna drown when I'm in it. I bet she gonna get loud when I'm in it. And we might have a child.
It's funny, I've been cooler on Polo G in recent weeks, as it's felt like his content's lost a little bit of flavor in comparison with the more developed and mature insight that he previously showcased. So I'll admit, I was really nervous about this song going to number 1, with the vibe around it being that it was pedestrian, but it turns out I actually wound up liking this a decent bit. Now, I will say it's what you would expect from Polo G in terms of somewhat melodic delivery, desaturated melody, this time coming from a ukulele, a trap beat that could really be a bit better blended, some nice piano accents, but this is the good side of Polo G actually meeting the expectations. Yeah, the hook's a flex, but it sure as hell doesn't sound like he's getting a lot out of it, especially by the verses where you can tell he's kind of drained and tired and trying to split both the street life and his newfound success, especially if it doesn't really feel all that rewarding and he has to go back to the drugs to feel anything. In particular, I think the second verse here is really strong, where he wants to talk about his feelings, but it feels rehearsed and mechanical to do so, and as such, he's got to throttle back his frustration and anger because he doesn't want to burn any more bridges with people when talking about it, especially as he's lost too many people to burn those bridges. There's a legit emotional core to this, I will say that, and while I don't love how easily it slides towards cliche, and I don't put it among his best, Martin and Gina's still better, it's a nice upturn. And with this being his first number 1, I'm alright with that. Solid stuff. And this wound up a pretty good week, where even I can see the appeal in the songs I don't like. Cause yeah, Big Gangsta by Kevin Gates, Dishonourable Mention, but the hook is still really good. And while that might also be true with You Belong With Me by Taylor Swift, again, the song has lasted, but it's also long exhausted all my patience. It's the worst of the week here, especially with that re-recording. I don't like the guitar on that bridge at all. But the best of the week, I gotta give that to Taylor as well, because The Way I Loved You is a legit great song she made better. I'm giving a tie for Honourable Mention. Shy Away by 21 Pilots and RAPSTAR by Polo G, because I see both of them working for what they are, even if they don't blow my mind just yet, and they could grow on me. Next week, you know what the fallout from all this, unless Slime Language 2 dominates the Hot 100, which is possible, so stay tuned. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.